"Why did you name me Javier, Dad?" My son Javier asked me this question as we were driving home from his t-ball game after grabbing a single scoop ice cream cone. "Can I change my name when I get older?" Each one of my 4 children had asked me the same question when they were about 5 or 6 years old. My oldest son Diego asked me one night when I was reading him a go-to-bed book, why was I named Diego Jesus Margil Barbosa Mireles? I informed him as my first child, in which my wife let me pick the name, that he was named after the famous Mexican muralist Diego Rivera, and found out that my Diego was born almost on the same day as his namesake, 100 years minus 1 day. He was named Jesus after my older brother, whom I thought would never have children, and named Margil after my grandfather. But he was not impressed. He still thought I should have probably named him Kurt or Steve, or another name that doesn't take up too much space, or no one would notice the first day of school. Sergio Andres, my second oldest son, asked me the same question when I was trying to get him out of the bathtub. He said the kids in school had a hard time saying his name and came up with words like surgery and Sergio Valente, plus words we can't say in a family-style home. Finally, he questioned, "Didn't you know any English names, Dad?" I told him his mother and I purposely picked names that could not be easily changed to English ones, like Carlos to Chuck, Juan to John, and Jose to Joe. But when my daughter, Lorena Pilar, asked me why we named her Lorena, I told her it was one of the most beautiful names we could ever think of. And why would she want to be one of the thousands of Bettys, Sallys, or Mary Sues? She was very hurt and thought we were punishing her or something. Which gets us back to my youngest son, Javier, who was initially named Oscar Javier. But after less than 24 hours of repeatedly hearing, little Oscar, little Oscar, little Oscar, in the nursery room of the hospital, we thought we would not subject him to 20 years of that. So we switched his name to Javier Oscar. And I was ready to give my keep your personal cultural pride speech to my 6-year-old, and was ready to open my mouth wide with advice when suddenly
I'm not sure what you said.
I got this inspiration, Suri. I got this inspiration to keep quiet and listen to what my 6-year-old son had to say. "You know, Dad, I want to change my name when I get older to Oscar so I can be more like you." Oh. You can clap.
Yeah.
One of the first poems that I wrote a long time ago was one of the first persons that we had black and white television, and we were talking earlier about shoveling coal. I just remember that we had a coal furnace, and they would bring it over and deliver it down the basement. You had I forgot I did that. Thanks, Carol, for reminding me. So, but the first person I saw on TV who I thought was good enough to look like me was Elvis Presley. Just kidding. So this poem is called "Elvis Presley Was a Chicano." In the latest edition of the National Enquirer, it was revealed that Elvis Presley, yes, the legendary Elvis, was a Chicano. Fans were outraged. Critics cited his heritage as an important influence. I was stunned. Can you believe it? Well, I didn't really at first, but then I remembered his jet black hair, you know, with the little curl in the front, sort of reminded me of my cousin Chewy. And Elvis always wore either those tight-pack black pants like the ones in West Side Story, or a baggy pinstripe zoot suit Pachuco style with a pair of blue suede shoes to match. Then I figured, no, it couldn't be. So I traced this story back to his hometown, a little pueblo, a little town outside of Tupelo, Mississippi, a son of migrant sharecroppers trying to figure a way out of rural poverty. Let's see, Elvis joined the army, maybe enlisted with his homies. They never made a movie about it, but he fought hard anyways. And I read somewhere that Chicanos have won more Silver Stars and Purple Hearts than any other ethnic group. Maybe Elvis was a Chicano. I wasn't convinced yet. Elvis was a swooner, a dancer, and a ladies' man, and always won the girl that hated him in the beginning of the movie. He had to be a Latin lover or something. Even Valentino and Sinatra had a little Italian in them. Elvis played guitar like my Uncle Carlos, always hitting the same 4 notes over and over again. But now I think I've figured it out. It was probably that Colonel Parker's idea to change his cultural identity, since it was just after the second big war and the Zoot Suit riots. It wasn't the right time for a Chicano superstar to be pelvising around on the Ed Sullivan show late on a Sunday night. I think it was just a hoax to convince more people to buy that newspaper. If Elvis Presley really was a Chicano, he wouldn't have settled to die alone in an empty mansion with no family around, no familia around, who cared enough to cry. This next poem is was written on saw my experience the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I was in junior high school at the time. In the 7th grade in 1967, playing football on the school playground, I heard that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Some kids cried. Other students didn't know what to feel. I felt a little sad. I headed to the 3rd floor classroom for my 4th period class at Washington Junior High School. I realized I had to step it up a bit because I was running late again. As I turned the corner and shot up the final set of stairs, I saw an unfamiliar dark face standing on the top of the stairwell, with his eyes swinging as wildly as both his arms, screaming and hitting people as they walked up those steps. I was about to turn around when I realized that I did not have enough time to go around the 2nd floor detour without being late again. I continued to march up those 13 steps. I could see some students begin to shift their whole bodies slightly to the left, leading with their right shoulder, as if trying to provide a target for the attacker to aim for besides their face. Other students decided to take the hit head-on, directly in the middle of their chest, their pummeled bodies flying as if hit by the thick force of water from a fire hydrant. I could hear him screaming, "They killed him! You killed him! They killed him!" As I took another cautious step forward, I took a quick peek at his face. I knew everyone in this school, and I confirmed to myself that he was not a student. But before my eyes left his face, I made a startling discovery. I saw a tear appear on his cheek. He was crying. He was crying but kept punching and swinging. Not one of the students said anything when they got hit. They just released a almost being careful not to let out a sound to warn other students. And the students held in their tears too, clutching between their clenched bare fists, hands and fingers. At this point I realized this person who had terrorized our school, armed only with his lightning fast fists, was crying, screaming, and hitting the world around him in a whirlwind of emotion that was raining upon all those students in that stairwell. And I was next up for this unending onslaught of violence. And as he cocked his arm for the more than 100th time, I wrestled the urge to capture my balance as soon as I could. You got a new copy or something. You get what you pay for. An angelic voice from the other side of the stairwell said, hey man, that's Oscar. He's cool. He's okay." And the man-child quickly stepped aside and let me pass. And as I headed down the hallway with a sigh of relief draped across my face, I realized it shouldn't be that simple. And I have wished every day since that I had found the courage to speak up for what dreams Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, even if it meant falling down over my words in that stairwell. And my last poem is called Lost and Found Language. And so this is the anthology. I didn't know there were Latinos in Wisconsin. And Rosa has 2 stories in the book. It's 40 different writers. My youngest son has a haiku in the book. And my nephew, Ben, who just had a birthday in China, he illustrated the book. This is a picture of my mother and her sisters in 1942 when they first came to Wisconsin. So this is called Lost and Found Language. It started in 1949 when my oldest brother, Julian, came home from school in Racine, Wisconsin after flunking kindergarten. How do you flunk kindergarten? He spoke no English and declared to my parents that the rest of the kids have to learn to speak English if we plan on staying here in the United States. So my parents lined up the rest of the 7 younger children, had us straighten up, tilt our heads back, reached in our mouths with their bare hands, and took turns slicing our tongues in half, making a simple but unspoken contract that from then on the parents would speak Spanish and the children would respond back only in English. How do you lose a native language? Does it get misplaced in the recesses of your brain, or does it never quite stick to the sides of your mind? For me, it would always start with a question from a brown-faced stranger. ¿Hablas español? Which means, do you speak Spanish? which meant if they had asked me if I spoke Spanish, this wasn't going to be a good start at having the conversation. My face would start to get flushed with redness, and before I had the chance to stammer the words, I don't, I could see it in their eyes, looking at my embarrassed face, searching for an answer that they already knew. As I walked away, I knew what they were thinking. Who is this guy? How can he not speak his mother's tongue? Where did he grow up anyways? Racine? Doesn't he have any pride in knowing who he is or where he came from? I tried to reply, but as the words in Spanish floated down from my brain, they got caught in between my teeth, the rocks of shame. I spoke in half-tongue. My future wife taught me how to speak Spanish, mainly by being Colombian and not speaking English. And I had already known the language of hands and love, which got me confident enough to reach deep inside myself to find the beautiful sounds and Latin rhythms that lay deep within me. And although I still feel my heart jump a beat when someone asks, "Hablas Español?" now the Spanish resonates within me and echoes back, "Sí, y usted también?" And today as I talk with the Spanish-speaking students in our GED program, they can not only feel my words, they can feel my warm heart splash ancient Spanish sounds off my native tongue that has finally grown whole again. Thank you very much.